If Americans doubt we are living in perilous times in our nation's history, they need to look no further than at what's happening in the financial markets in the last few days. Clearly, Madam President, this is no ordinary time, no normal economic downturn. This is a day, Madam President, unlike other days. This crisis and the choice it demands are unlike few we have ever seen before. And by now, it's well known how we arrived at this critical moment. Years of what President or Secretary Paulson himself has called bad lending practices went essentially unchecked by a regulatory system that was not on the job. These bad lending practices had happened primarily in the area of mortgage lending, as we all know. Culpability for these practices exists in every link of the lending chain, from mortgage bankers to lenders to the investment banks. Certainly there are many borrowers who acted irresponsibly. They should not be excused for the consequences of their actions, but neither should those whose culpability was significant and catastrophic in terms of their impact on mortgage lending and on the credit markets. Almost 2 years ago, the Senate Banking Committee held the first congressional hearing of the new Congress on predatory lending. At that hearing, I and others of that committee, Democrats and Republicans, warned of the coming wave of foreclosures that could devastate millions of homeowners and have a devastating impact on our economy. Some, Madam President, unfortunately scoffed at those predictions. Well, no one is scoffing anymore. The financial market turmoil is affecting families and businesses all across this country, and the contagion has spread beyond the shores of our own nation. A paper in my state, the Connecticut Post of Bridgeport, Connecticut, reported at the Sacred Heart University, Julie Savino is the Dean of Student Financial Assistance. She is fielding calls from parents who never before sought financial aid. Laid off or without medical insurance or unable to secure a home equity line of credit, parents are suddenly on the hunt for alternative means to pay for their children's education. Some students have had to walk away from their educations altogether, she points out. Reuters News Service reported that Kansas City cabinet maker Anthony Gallo had no debt 18 months ago, none. Now he's being forced to borrow just to make payroll. Let me quote Mr. Gallo. "My line of credit has been cut to nothing. We're all hurting and wondering what is going to happen. They've got to do something," he said, "to save these banks. They can't kill our economy. End of quote. The fact is, Madam President, the banking and financial system is an essential part of our nation's economy. A halt in the flow of money threatens not only Wall Street firms, which would not bring us here today, but what is a danger is the way of life for millions of Americans far beyond Lower Manhattan. Right now, banks are afraid, in some cases unable, to lend money. Money that companies need to make payroll, money that families need to pay medical bills, money that students need to pay for college, money that small businesses need to stock their shelves with inventory, money that a gas station needs to supply their pumps with gas, if you will, and money that investors provide to entrepreneurs to start new businesses and create new jobs. We know that money isn't moving. That's what the credit crunch means. Just 10 days ago, the administration, if I may, and just to remind my colleagues, this is the bill. I hold it in my hands, 3 pages long. A bill that was sent to us by the administration. A bill that called for $700 billion to go out without any questions asked, without any oversight, any accountability, any taxpayer protection. 3 pages. I might point out, as I said to some, a no documentation loan for $100,000 to a subprime borrower a few years ago was 4 pages long. Here, a request for $700 billion is 3 pages long. My colleagues on both sides here said no to that. We're not going to do that. And as a result, over these last 2 weeks, Madam President, we have put together a piece of legislation that gives us much more heightened protection about how this program would work. And there are a lot of people who deserve tremendous credit for this, but I want to thank my colleagues for rejecting this offer of 3 pages for $700 billion in return for drafting a comprehensive bill that will provide, I believe, the kind of security that people are looking for with a plan of this magnitude. I refused, along with my colleagues, to write a blank check on this. Not just for this administration, I would do it with any administration, and as my colleagues did as well. This crisis demanded that we bring together members of the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, Republicans and Democrats, and hammer out a better solution for the American people. Our leader, Senator Harry Reid, the majority leader, deserves incredible credit for his determination to stick with this and not walk away and demand each and every day when things began to fall apart that we stay at this and work at it. This proposal, which we offer to our colleagues this afternoon, the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008. This legislation will address, we hope, our nation's economic emergency in three key ways: economic stabilization, taxpayer protection, and home ownership preservation. This bill gives the Treasury Secretary the authority to respond quickly, forcibly, but responsibly to the current crisis. It authorizes him to buy a total of $700 billion in troubled assets, broken down into three separate tranches, with the final tranche subject to congressional review and approval. $700 billion is staggering. It's staggering, a staggering amount of money. We all understand and share the anger of the American people that they're being asked to commit that sum. But in a $14 trillion economy, this is the kind of financial firepower that must be brought to bear to contain the financial crisis. Secondly, in consideration of the extraordinary burden that this bill potentially places on the taxpayer, we maximize to the extent possible protections of that taxpayer. The bill establishes an oversight board to review and shape the policies of the Treasury Department in carrying out this program. And unlike the original Treasury proposal, this bill subjects the actions of the Treasury Secretary to strong judicial review that will prohibit actions that are arbitrary, capricious, or otherwise unlawful. It places firm limits on executive compensation to help ensure that corporate executives whose companies receive taxpayer benefits do not walk away with golden parachutes and are not otherwise rewarded for wrongdoing. We require taxpayers to receive warrants so that they can benefit when a company benefits from taxpayer assistance. And in addition, we require that any profits generated from the sale of these assets purchased with public funds go to reducing our national debt. And we provide for extensive reports so that members of Congress and the public at large will know how every dime of this program is being used. Within 48 hours of any transaction, Madam President, the Treasury Secretary will have to report the amount, the terms, and the participants associated with that transaction. The General Accounting Organization will have immediate and ongoing credit audit authority, and report to Congress every 60 days. A special inspector general will be established to monitor and police the program's activities and its participants. The third priority, Madam President, advanced by this legislation is home ownership. This is not an ancillary objective. It is inherent, in my view, to our efforts to resolve this economic crisis. Chairman Bernanke himself has spoken forcefully on this point. Our economy will recover only when we put an end to the spiral of foreclosures that is pulling down our entire financial system. To that end, Madam President, the legislation requires that all federal agencies that own or control mortgages or mortgage-backed securities to preserve home ownership. In addition, the legislation expands eligibility for the Hope for Homeowners program, which allows lenders and borrowers to access federal mortgage insurance in order to put homeowners on a path to security, not financial ruin. This is not an easy vote, Madam President. There will be no balloons or bunting or parades for members at the end of this process. The knowledge that, at one of our nation's moments of maximum economic peril, we acted, not for the benefit of a particular few, but for all Americans, so that they and those who come after them may enjoy the full blessings of life in this great nation of ours. We are a nation of optimism and confidence. Americans deserve to have that restored, and our job tonight will be to give them a chance to do just that. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment.